Many of you may recall that I helped popularize keto. And in fact, in 2017, I wrote a book called Fat for Fuel, which when it was released was the #1 book sold in the United States overall, not just in some obscure category on Amazon. And many people improved, including myself, by following the principles in here. And I believed at the time that fat was the best fuel that you could use to generate energy in your body. And I'm not dismissing the fact that many people improved, including myself, but many people also had challenges following the low carb diet, especially for a long time. And this information I just learned relatively recently, within the last year, as a result of studying the work of Ray Peat, who sadly passed away in Thanksgiving of 2022, but provided us with an important legacy of work that I think could help us understand how the body works even better. So one of the things that he helped me understand is that your body needs sugar. It absolutely needs sugar. If you don't get it, you will be dead shortly. And because you'll be in a hypoglycemic coma. That's what happens. You have to have sugar. Your brain requires it. It's absolutely imperative. So thankfully, your body has a rescue system when your sugar gets too low. Now your body only has a limited store of carbohydrates or sugar in the form of glycogen, typically in the liver. You have it in your muscles too, but only your muscles can use that. But systemically, it's the one in your liver that makes the difference. So you only have enough for about a day, maybe two, some people possibly 3, but it's typically within 1 and 2 days. So when you exhaust that, your body has to make sugar. So the question becomes, how does your body make sugar? I did not know this. I did not appreciate it. I did not realize this was the mechanism. But when I share the mechanism with you, you might be as equally shocked as I will. It makes a hormone that you all have heard of called cortisol. Now, cortisol is in a group of hormones called the glucocorticoids. And it's just what it says. The gluco means glucose. Cortico means comes from the adrenal cortex, and oid means as a steroid. So the primary purpose, and if you study cortisol and look at up its functions, you'll find that it's designed for glucose homeostasis, but it does far more than that. It's actually a rescue hormone that your body has, because if your blood sugar gets too low, you're going to die. So thankfully, we have cortisol, and when it's activated, it will send signals to your body to break down your muscles, your bones, and brain. Why? Because it needs amino acids, which is going to use as the raw material to make glucose in a process called gluconeogenesis in your liver. So thankfully, you have this rescue pathway to increase your sugar. And it's very rare where someone ever dies from a hypoglycemic coma because their cortisol level rescues them, but they will die prematurely from the effects of elevated cortisol, chronic inflammation, because that's its other purpose. And many people, clinicians included, believe that that's its primary purpose, but it's not. And in fact, I've been a participant in many longevity groups and have listened to many of the experts. And personally, maybe my memory is getting not as good as it used to be, but I don't ever recall anyone highlighting the fact that elevated cortisol level is a primary way that you're going to age. It is literally the primary aging hormone. So if you are interested in living longer and living healthy, then you're going to want to lower your cortisol levels. And in fact, a study was published just recently in May of 2023 that was done to show what the differences are between a low carb, high fat diet, which I was promoting and recommending, and a low fat, high carb diet. Well, wouldn't you know, both of those groups had a difference of 30% changes in their mortality rate. One, the low carb, high fat diet, increased their mortality rate by 30%, whereas the converse, the low fat, high carb, actually decreased it. So this, to me, I encountered this study not too long after I started to understand this information. And to me, it was supporting evidence. This is something I should consider. You may want to consider too. You may dismiss it. And if you're doing great now, that's fine, but it's something to consider. So it seems like it would be prudent to not activate cortisol continuously and accelerate the aging process. But here's the caution. Here's the danger. Here's the concern. Many people have tried high carbohydrates and they failed miserably in many cases. Why? I want to tell you one of the primary reasons that this is likely the case. Because they didn't understand that your body has a metabolic switch. In many ways, a switch is a switch very similar to the one on a railroad track, where the train comes along and then you throw the switch and it goes down on a different track. It can only go down one track at a time. The train can't split itself in two and go down both tracks. So there's a switch. And actually, this switch has a name. It's called the Randall cycle. It essentially describes a process where your tissue can only burn one fuel at a time. It can't burn fat and glucose at the same time. And glucose is the same, it's a synonym for sugar. So the threshold appears to be, and this is different for different people, but it's about 30%. And what do I mean? If your fat level is above 30%, then you're not going to be able to take that sugar, that glucose, and run it through your mitochondria, which is a small organelle within almost every blood cell in your body, except for the red blood cells, that produces cellular energy in the form of ATP. That's the way, that's really one of the primary differences between higher order organisms and lower order ones like bacteria. They don't have mitochondria, we do. And it's very efficient at creating energy. However, if your fat level is over, fat content, the percentage of fat that you're consuming in your diet is over 30%, then this sugar is backed up and it can't go through the mitochondria. It has an alternate source. That alternate source is called glycolysis, and essentially is very inefficient. You can take one molecule of glucose and you only make two ATP. That's it. And it also doesn't require oxygen. And then, so we think, well, that's great. It's not going to create many reactive oxygen species, but it's actually quite to the contrary, because it's so inefficient. It's going to create a lot more reactive oxygen species. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So if your fat level is under 30%, and in some cases where there's some pretty severe metabolic inflexibility, like obesity or diabetes, that level may have to decrease to 15 to 20%, which is pretty extreme. That's a pretty low fat diet. I don't think it ever really should go under 10%, but the lower you can go, the better that you can tolerate. Usually meal or diets under 10% fat are going to be very hard to tolerate. It's just not doable for most people. But the threshold appears to be 30%. If you have less than 30% of your total calories as fat, then the glucose that you're ingesting can be used efficiently in your mitochondria. And we'll talk, there's some different ways that you can burn that even within the mitochondria if your fat is less than 30%. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But that's the primary principle, is you've got to get the fat level right first and foremost. And then you can hope that you're going to have a chance of burning this. Again, that could be as little as 15% if you're obese or diabetic. So you'd have to play with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why most people who try introducing the carbohydrates run into problems. The other is you don't want to do this quickly. If you've been on low carb, high fat for years and you're doing okay, fine. Maybe you don't want to consider this at all. But if you're having problems or you want to consider it, then maybe make the transition slowly. I was taking anywhere between 50 and 100 grams of carbohydrates for many years. And I switched to about almost 500 grams of carbohydrates over a few months. And it seems to be doing pretty well for me. But just let your body tell you what's good for you and use that to guide your process through the system.